The Puppeteer's Manor. The day we moved into the old mansion, there was an eerie chill in the air that seemed to gnaw at my skin. It was a sprawling estate, with towering spires that pierced the sky, casting long shadows that danced ominously on the ground. My wife, Emily, and our two children, Alex and Lily, stood beside me, their faces a mix of awe and trepidation. This was supposed to be a new beginning, a fresh start away from the chaos of city life. Little did we know, it would be the start of something far more sinister. The previous owner, a renowned puppeteer named Edgar Thornton, had left behind a legacy of fame and infamy. His puppet shows were legendary, but there were always rumors about his eccentricity. People said he lived alone in the manor, crafting his puppets with a meticulous precision that bordered on madness. When he died, the manor had been left to rot until we stumbled upon it in an old real estate listing. We had purchased it for a steal, unaware of the secrets lurking within its walls. The first few days were uneventful as we unpacked our belongings, trying to make the cold, dark rooms feel like home. But it wasn't long before strange things began to happen. It started with the sounds, faint creaking and scraping noises echoing through the halls at night. At first, I dismissed them as the house settling. But as the nights wore on, the noises grew more pronounced and deliberate. One evening, as I sat in the study, leafing through a dusty old book I'd found in the library, I heard a distinct clatter from the attic above. It was as if something heavy had been dropped, followed by the sound of tiny feet scurrying across the floorboards. My heart skipped a beat. I chalked it up to rats and resolved to check it out in the morning. But deep down, a nagging sense of dread took root in my mind. The real horror began when we discovered the puppets. It was Lily who found them, tucked away in a forgotten room at the end of a long, dimly lit corridor. She'd been playing hide and seek with Alex when she stumbled upon the hidden door. Inside, rows of marionettes hung from the ceiling like macabre trophies, their painted faces frozen in grotesque expressions. Some were clowns with wide, maniacal grins, others were children with eyes too large and glassy, almost lifelike. "Daddy, they're creepy," Lily said, clutching my leg as she peered into the room. Her voice was barely a whisper, her eyes wide with fear. "Let's not go in there, sweetheart," I replied, gently steering her away from the threshold. The air inside felt stagnant, charged with a malevolent energy that made my skin crawl. I made a mental note to lock the door, but curiosity gnawed at me. What was Thornton doing with so many puppets? That night, as Emily and the kids slept, I returned to the room with a flashlight in hand. I had to know more. As I swept the beam of light across the room, something caught my eye, a journal, half hidden beneath a pile of old costumes. It was a small, leather-bound book, the pages yellowed with age. As I opened it, the words within revealed the twisted mind of Edgar Thornton. He wrote of his obsession with creating puppets that could move without strings, puppets that would come alive with the souls of the damned. He detailed dark rituals and sacrifices, his handwriting growing more erratic as the entries progressed. The final pages were filled with frantic scrawls and disturbing sketches of puppets with human features. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. The flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to shift and writhe. In the darkness, I saw movement, a marionette, its head tilted unnaturally, its eyes fixed on me. I stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. The room was plunged into darkness, and in that moment, I felt an icy breath on the back of my neck. A whisper, barely audible, slithered into my ear, "Play with us." Panic surged through me as I scrambled for the flashlight, its beam now casting frantic arcs across the room. The puppets were moving, their limbs jerking in unnatural motions as if responding to an unseen puppeteer. I bolted from the room, slamming the door behind me, my heart racing with terror. Back in the safety of our bedroom, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that we were not alone in the house. I could still hear the faint whispering, the sound of wooden feet tapping on the floors. I knew then that something evil resided within the manor, something that wouldn't rest until it had its way with us. And as I drifted into a fitful sleep, one thought haunted my mind: the puppeteer's legacy was far from over. The following morning, I awoke with a sense of unease that clung to me like a second skin. The memories of the previous night played on a loop in my mind, each scene more vivid and unsettling than the last. Emily noticed my unrest and pressed me for details, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the puppets, the journal, or the chilling whisper that had pierced the darkness. I didn't want to alarm her or the children, at least not until I understood more about what was happening in the house. Throughout the day, I found myself drawn back to the journal. I had tucked it away in a drawer, but its presence loomed large, as if the very pages held the answers I was desperate to find. When Emily took Alex and Lily into town to explore the local shops, I seized the opportunity to delve deeper into Thornton's writings. Page after page, the journal revealed a story of obsession and madness. Thornton believed he could transcend death by transferring his soul into his puppets, a process he referred to as the Great Awakening. His writings were a blend of meticulous detail and frenzied scribbles, the words growing more and more deranged as the entries continued. He spoke of voices that guided him, ancient spirits that whispered secrets of dark magic. It was clear that Thornton had been consumed by his own creation, descending into a madness that left him isolated and feared by those who once revered him. But one entry stood out among the others. Dated just days before his death, it read, "_ the ritual nears completion. Soon, they will all see. The marionettes will dance without strings, and I will be eternal. A chill ran down my spine as I read the words. It was as if Thornton had left a warning from beyond the grave, a promise that his malevolent intentions were far from over. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the hallway. The sound reverberated through the manor, sharp and jarring. I rushed out of the study, my heart racing, to find the source of the commotion. The hallway was empty, but one of the doors, the door to the puppet room, was ajar. I felt a cold dread settle over me. I had locked that door. I was certain of it. With trepidation, I approached the room, each step echoing ominously in the silent house. The door creaked open, revealing a scene that made my blood run cold. The puppets had been moved. They were no longer hanging limply from the ceiling but arranged in a circle on the floor, their lifeless eyes fixed on a central figure, a marionette I hadn't noticed before. It was larger than the others, with intricately carved features and a regal appearance. Its face was an unsettling blend of beauty and malevolence, its eyes painted with an intensity that seemed almost lifelike. In its hand was a small, ornate dagger, its blade glinting in the dim light. I took a cautious step forward, my eyes locked on the new puppet. As I did, the room seemed to shift, the air growing thick with an unseen energy. A sense of foreboding gripped me, urging me to leave, to run as far as I could from this place. But curiosity got the better of me. I reached out to touch the puppet, to see if it held any clues about Thornton's twisted plans. As my fingers brushed against its wooden skin, a sudden, violent shudder coursed through the room. The floor trembled beneath my feet, and the air was filled with a chorus of dissonant whispers, rising in a cacophony of voices. Then, as quickly as it began, the chaos ceased. The room was silent once more, the puppet still and lifeless. But the sense of unease lingered, an ominous reminder that something dark and ancient was awakening within the manor. That night, the whispering returned. Louder this time, more insistent. It seemed to seep through the walls, a relentless chant that echoed through the halls. I lay in bed, paralyzed by fear, as the sounds crept closer, filling my mind with images of the marionettes and their ghastly dance. I knew I had to act, to find a way to stop whatever Thornton had set in motion. But as I lay there, a sinister realization took hold: the puppets were not mere objects. They were alive, vessels for Thornton's twisted spirit, and they were bent on fulfilling his dark desires. And so, I resolved to confront the evil within the manor, to uncover the truth behind Thornton's sinister legacy. But deep down, I feared it was already too late, that the puppets were beyond my control, driven by a malevolence that transcended the grave. In the shadows of the manor, the puppeteer's deadly game had only just begun. The following morning, the manor was eerily silent. It was as if the house itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Emily noticed my anxiety and suggested we spend the day outdoors to clear our minds. But I couldn't leave. I needed to understand the full scope of Thornton's dark intentions before they consumed us all. After a tense breakfast, I sent Emily and the kids to visit the nearby park, promising I'd join them soon. Once they left, I made my way back to the library, determined to uncover more about the house and its previous owner. I rummaged through stacks of old newspapers, documents, and photos, piecing together a timeline of Thornton's life. The further I dug, the more I realized how deeply his obsession with puppetry ran. Stories of his puppets enchanted audiences, but whispers of his sinister reputation persisted. People claimed he dabbled in the occult, practicing dark arts to give life to his creations. As I read, an unsettling pattern emerged. Many of Thornton's assistants had mysteriously vanished over the years, their disappearances never explained. It was then that I found an old photograph that made my blood run cold. In it, Thornton stood in front of a workbench, surrounded by his puppets. But what caught my attention was the puppet at the center, a marionette with a familiar face, the same one I'd seen in the room. Its features bore an uncanny resemblance to Thornton himself. Suddenly, the room felt colder. A shadow seemed to pass over me, and the sensation of being watched crept over my skin. I turned, expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the room was empty. With renewed determination, I decided to search the attic. I had a hunch that Thornton's secrets were hidden there, buried beneath years of dust and neglect. The attic door was old and creaked as I pushed it open. Dust particles danced in the shafts of light filtering through the small window. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The attic was cluttered with forgotten relics, old furniture, trunks filled with moth-eaten clothes, and stacks of papers. But at the far end of the room, something caught my eye, a large wooden trunk, locked with a heavy chain. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The lock was rusted, but after several attempts, I managed to pry it open with a crowbar. The lid creaked as I lifted it, revealing its contents, a collection of marionettes, each more grotesque than the last. Their faces were twisted in expressions of anguish and terror, their eyes dull and lifeless. But as I reached deeper into the trunk, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, a small, ornate key. Clutching the key, I turned to leave the attic when a sudden noise stopped me in my tracks. The puppets in the trunk shifted, their limbs moving as if guided by an unseen force. I stumbled back, horrified, as they began to crawl from the trunk, their movements unnervingly lifelike. Panic surged through me as I bolted for the door, the sound of wooden limbs clattering behind me. I stumbled down the stairs, the key still clutched tightly in my hand, desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding around me. Back in the safety of the hallway, I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. The house seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, the very walls vibrating with Thornton's dark presence. In that moment, I realized the key was more than a relic. It was the answer, the tool I needed to end Thornton's sinister influence once and for all. But where did it belong? Desperate for answers, I returned to the puppet room, the place where it all began. The marionettes lay motionless, their eyes fixed on the central figure, the Thornton puppet. As I approached, I noticed a small lock on its chest, the intricate design matching the key I had found. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click, and the puppet's chest swung open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, I found a rolled-up scroll and a small vial of dark liquid. The scroll was covered in ancient symbols and incantations, the writing so intricate it seemed alive. As I examined it, a terrible understanding dawned upon me. This was the source of Thornton's power, the dark magic he had used to bind his soul to the puppets. The vial, I realized, was the key to breaking the curse. But as I held it, a voice echoed through the room, a low, menacing whisper that chilled me to the bone. "You cannot stop me." The room darkened, and the shadows began to twist and writhe, forming the shape of a man, a grotesque puppet version of Thornton, his eyes filled with malice. "I will be eternal," the specter hissed, advancing toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I backed away, clutching the vial, my mind racing. I had to act quickly. The fate of my family, my very soul, depended on it. But as the darkness closed in, I realized the true horror of Thornton's legacy. He was not alone. The puppets, animated by his twisted spirit, rose from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with a malevolent hunger. I was trapped, surrounded by the horrors of Thornton's creation. And as the marionettes closed in, I knew the final act of the Puppeteer's deadly game was about to begin. As Thornton's spectral figure loomed closer, I clutched the vial tightly, my mind racing for a way out. The marionettes, now animated with malevolent life, formed a circle around me, their eyes gleaming with a hunger that was almost palpable. The room was thick with an oppressive energy, the shadows twisting and turning in a grotesque dance orchestrated by the Puppeteer's spirit. "You are nothing but a plaything in my eternal show," Thornton taunted, his voice echoing through the room with a chilling resonance. "This manor is my stage, and you, my latest puppet." Desperation coursed through me. I had to act, but Thornton's presence was overwhelming, his dark power suffocating. My thoughts flashed to my family, to Emily and the kids, their lives in danger as long as Thornton's twisted magic held sway. I couldn't let his evil consume us all. As the marionettes closed in, I remembered the scroll I had found inside the puppet's chest. The incantations written on its ancient pages had to hold the answer to breaking the curse. With trembling hands, I unfurled the scroll, my eyes scanning the cryptic symbols, searching for the key to Thornton's undoing. The words seemed to leap off the page, the symbols pulsating with a life of their own. It was as if the scroll was guiding me, revealing the steps needed to sever Thornton's ties to the physical world. But as I tried to read the incantations, Thornton's laughter filled the room, a chilling reminder of his power. "You think you can defeat me with mere words?" he sneered, his puppet form towering over me. "I am beyond your reach, beyond your comprehension." But I had no choice. I began to chant the incantations aloud, my voice shaking but resolute. The room seemed to vibrate with an unholy energy, the shadows writhing in response to my words. The marionettes hesitated, their movements faltering as if struggling against an invisible force. The air grew colder, and Thornton's spectral form wavered, his expression twisting into one of rage. "You cannot stop me," he screamed, his voice reverberating through the manor. "I am eternal." But I continued, my voice rising above the cacophony. The shadows writhed violently, and the marionettes began to fall, their strings cut by an unseen hand. Thornton's form flickered, his power unraveling as the incantations took hold. In a final act of defiance, Thornton lunged toward me, his puppet form disintegrating into a mass of shadows and splintered wood. I hurled the vial at him, the glass shattering on impact and releasing a burst of light that engulfed the room. The shadows shrieked and dissolved, the oppressive energy dissipating as Thornton's spirit was torn asunder. For a moment, the room was silent, the only sound the thudding of my heart. The puppets lay scattered and lifeless, their eyes dull and empty. Thornton's presence was gone, his malevolent influence finally banished from the manor. I staggered to my feet, the weight of the ordeal pressing down on me. The scroll lay at my feet, its pages blank, the incantations faded away as if they had never existed. But the relief was short-lived. As I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. The puppet at the center of the room, the one that bore Thornton's likeness, was missing. Panic surged through me as I raced through the manor, the rooms echoing with my footsteps. I reached the entrance just as Emily and the kids returned, their faces filled with concern. "What's wrong?" Emily asked, her voice laced with worry. "Are you okay?" "I think it's over," I replied, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. "But we need to leave. Now." As we made our way to the car, a nagging feeling tugged at the back of my mind. Something was amiss. I glanced back at the manor, its looming silhouette etched against the darkening sky. The shadows seemed deeper, the windows like empty eyes watching us leave. But it was only as we drove away that the true horror of Thornton's legacy became clear. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold, a figure standing at the window, watching us with an unnatural stillness. It was the puppet, the one that resembled Thornton. Its eyes, once painted and lifeless, now gleamed with a malevolent intelligence. As we disappeared from view, it raised a hand in a slow, mocking wave. Thornton's spirit had not been vanquished. It had found a new vessel, a new puppet to inhabit. The manor, with its dark secrets and cursed history, remained his domain, a place where his twisted game would continue, where he would wait for new unsuspecting victims. As the realization sank in, a chill settled over me. The Puppeteer's legacy was far from over. And in the shadows of the manor, Thornton's sinister show would go on, forever orchestrating his deadly dance from beyond the grave.